Welcome to Go Home Heat, a wrestling podcast. This will be a year-end review. It will be a little bit disjointed in that we all made our own type of year-end review and awards system. I have a good friend, Ray, here.
Hi.
That's Ray. He said hi. And we have Nick, the lit one.
Hi.
There we go. And New Japan Jared.
That's me, baby.
Wow,
Wonder what
we
his
have to
list
keep
will
the
focus
theme.
on.
We have to keep the theme.
Oh yeah, my list. It's going to be a real surprise what New Japan Jared really liked this year.
That's right. It started.
Listen, I have a brand. Exactly, it's Stardom, baby.
I have a brand to protect. Start them in two different ways.
Yes.
Hey,
Jared, you wanna go first?
Way to pull it around.
With what inspired you this year in pro wrestling, what you thought was great or didn't think was great, whatever you want to talk about.
Oh, me first?
If you would like to.
Yeah, sure. So, looking back on this year, especially in New Japan, I kind of, when I was making this list, I was looking and I was thinking, man, there really wasn't that much wrestling, but it turns out there was quite a bit, and quite a bit of it was quite good. The G1 this year was kind of off the chain in terms of match quality. Like Ibushi had Ibushi this year, his year was phenomenal. Like just looking back through his lists of matches, both in the G1 as a singles wrestler and in the tag division with Tanahashi, dude, phenomenal. Naito, his run in the G1 was also worthy and of note. And he actually had my favorite match of the year with Tanahashi. That's going to be my number one match, was Naito Tanahashi, like day 1 or 2 of the G1 climax. That's my pick for my match of the year. But I did want to give a special shout out to a couple others. Young Bucks versus Kenny and Hangman was probably... it's going to be on like most of our lists, I think.
Mm-hmm.
That was probably my favorite tag match I may have ever seen. And my like mark out moment of the year was when Kenny kicks out at 1 of the Golden Trigger. That moment, I like lost my mind in that moment. It's so hype. It's so good. Oh my goodness.
Very good storytelling in that one, yes.
Dude, oh my gosh. It really, like Kenny and Hangman as a team, I feel like I didn't appreciate them enough. And I'm sad that they're broken up, honestly.
Yes.
But another couple special shout outs. Zack Sabre Jr. versus Will Ospreay. They had a couple of matches for the Rev Pro title, and both of them are off the charts good. But I got to give a special shout out to the second match they had over in Rev Pro Wrestling. If you haven't seen that, go check it out. It might be on YouTube. And one last one for me, Ibushi versus Suzuki in the G1.
Very
good. Those are my favorite matches. As for my favorite wrestlers, I think Ibushi. I think if I had to pick a wrestler of the year and not just my favorite, I'd have to pick Mox. Having talked to you guys before this, I feel like that's also going to be a running theme for wrestler of the year. But I don't think anyone carried his company for as long and as well as Mox did as champion. Every program Mox was in was great. Everyone he was in a program with looked better afterwards. Every match he had, every promo he did, was all aimed perfectly at making sure that the World Championship was top tier, top of the company, top of the card, most talked about. He put so much work into that.
Mm-hmm.
So he's off the charts for me this year. Even if he didn't have any of my favorite matches, he still had like 90% of my favorite promos.
He didn't
that
have the number one
promo
spot, but
he
he was
had.
consistently in the top 2 or something, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
That one promo he had with Eddie Kingston, like right on the Go Home show, right before. What was the name of that pay-per-view?
Full Gear?
Yeah, Full Gear. The Go Home show for Full Gear, his stare down with Eddie Kingston was perfect.
Eddie wasn't even thought of as a singles wrestler prior to that program.
He
was
wasn't
a
even
man.
Yeah.
Even in NWA, he was a manager. Moxley made him a formidable championship contender in like 2 weeks.
Dude, it was perfect. It was a perfect program too. There was so much history between those dudes. Oh man, that was a great feud. Good lord. Oh man.
Excellent.
You know, again, like looking back on this year, I almost in my head wanted to write off a lot of it, but good lord, there was some really good stuff this year, fellas.
It was a good year for wrestling, for sure.
Dude, oh my goodness. I'm so happy. You know, wrestling really provided a balloon for my mood this year. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. We didn't have anything else for a long time.
Yeah, that just straight up just wasn't anything.
Got anything else?
No, that was mainly it. And again, it's 99% New Japan stuff. Plus AEW. AEW really did knock it out of the park. I might not have talked about it as much, but I feel like AEW was consistently really, really, really good.
Every week.
Every week. Must watch TV.
Correct. All right, I'm going to kick it over to Ray. Ray, what'd you have this year?
This year, I had a couple. I really liked Hangman versus Kenny. Specifically that match. I feel like it built off of a lot of the elements of the first tag team match that made the story go a lot further. I also, of course, I really liked the tag team match. I really liked Sonata versus Zack Sabre Jr. at Wrestle Kingdom.
Great match.
Before that, before COVID, mainly because those people are just kind of wrestling soulmates. And it also kind of reminds me of a time before COVID and before all of this awful stuff just started happening. I also really liked The Fiend versus John Cena. I felt like that was probably WWE's best match of the year, mainly because it's telling the story of John Cena throughout his whole career. I really liked Taichi versus Kota. That was a great match. They were just kind of kicking each other for a minute. Liked Walter versus Dragunov. That was really stiff. The Stadium Stampede was really fun. That's about it for my matches. So should I move on to my top wrestlers?
Please do.
Number one is Mox.
What a surprise for everyone.
Number two is Hangman. Roman's up there somewhere, mainly because of his just evolution. Coda's up there, but the thing with Roman and Coda is that they were only there for like a third of the year. Difficult to put them very high up, or at least in the top three of this list. I think that's about it. Yeah.
All right. Now, Nick,
Yo,
let's move over to you, and you give us
I'm
some
glad.
opinions on pro wrestling this year.
During my weekends and stuff, I've been thinking about the wrestling of this year, and every time I think about it, it comes back to the theme of just you have to think out of the box in order, because as mentioned earlier by Ray a little bit, we've had a little bit of the thing called COVID. Don't know if you've heard of it. It's kind of sort of been running rampant, and so because of that, like after a certain point in like March, people had to find a creative way to do wrestling, and that could include empty arenas because of sheer safety concerns, or you have to pipe in something, or you have to do this or that, and so they'll throw everything at the wall that they would try it, and like, would it work? Would it not? Who knows? But that's all they could really do, because what can you do? It's either that or you risk people's health, and they still risk people's health because they're still having wrestling. But over time, this like everyone started to really kind of understand how to do it and what to do correctly. This is across the board, by the way. I'm not just talking about WWE. Obviously, we had New Japan just shut itself down, say, with Tanahashi making the really passionate speech of like, we're not coming back until we know it's safe, which I thought was very good for him to say. And you have like AEW having all these safety like precautions that they set up. You have Impact do a similar thing. And so with that being said, with the theme of out of the box, how do you make great matches out of the box? Well, I have written down all of my favorite matches of the year. They're not in any list, as you all know about me and my shtick. I have here on the, like, this is in no particular order, all of the Brody Lee tribute matches. Just all of them. You know?
Agreed.
I can't help but feel that, like, as a show, it was probably, like, the best show of the year, but it's also a thing that was, like, so heavily emotional and brought all of these things out that, out of people that you really wouldn't expect to see certain like move sets and stuff come out, and then suddenly you find yourself crying because here comes Eric Redbeard coming down off the stage to like hold up a sign. It's crazy. What something as silly as wrestling can really move you, and then this is kind of proof of the man's life and how
Thank
much
you for mentioning
he gave. Yeah. But on a less like emotional like note, I also have O'Reilly versus Balor 1. I'm not counting 2 because that technically was this year. So, only just counting the first one, but still it was oof. Like if you didn't think if you forgot O'Reilly could wrestle, this one reminded you that O'Reilly and Balor are like top of the board, great wrestlers. Oh lord. Obviously we have Young Bucks versus Kenny and Hangman from Revolution. You're going to see that as a common theme. One of the best tag team matches of the year, arguably of all time. We'll see. I also wrote down Mox versus Kingston from Full Gear. Not just was the program good, the match itself was fantastic, and I really enjoyed it thoroughly. I also have Roman versus Jay in Hell in a Cell with the I Quit match. Mwah. Because it's always, a match is good when you get texted from a friend of yours who doesn't really watch wrestling anymore, this all caps, did you see Hell in a Cell yet? And I'm just confused as, Jeremy, how did you find this number again?
Mm-hmm.
It is, I love you, Jeremy, if you're watching. But it's the thing where, like, that's how you know it's reached back into the mainstream. And I feel like Roman and Jay have just put up a program that really, it stepped up from a lot of like WWE's stuff that they've been going through for the last year. Arguably, like, save for one exception, the best feud and best characters of the year for WWE. I also wrote down Deonna Purrazzo versus Jordynne Grace in the Iron Man match. We ain't been talking about Impact, and I feel like we should. Impact has been putting on some sleeper hits, my guys. Some sleeper hits.
Yeah, I totally forgot.
Yeah,
I should have put that match in one of my favorites. That match was awesome.
Oh, yeah. Like,
Sure was.
Deonna Purrazzo proved that she wasn't just something to sleep on in NXT. She proved herself here, and Jordynne Grace is Jordynne Grace, so, enough said on her. Just fantastic. But my top two, these are the top two matches for the year for me that I've been tossing around my brain, because like, they're the ones, when I think about this year in wrestling, these are the two that I think of a lot. Sasha versus Bayley in Hell in a Cell. Sasha, like I alluded to this earlier, but like Sasha and Bayley have been carrying the WWE on the mainstream 100% of the time. I'm sure KP can kind of vouch for that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Oh yes, because Bayley had turned her character into this annoying kind of Vicky Guerrero, but also she can still put you down if she wanted to. While you had Sasha kind of being her sidekick, and finally seeing them go into a feud, and even if it lasted like only like a couple matches, they put it all on the mat. And my God, if you ever want,
Absolutely,
Sasha is consistently, I believe she's been in every single Hell in a Cell match over the women's. Am I right on that? And every single time she pulls out a banger. Her versus Becky from last year. Holy cow! Her versus Bayley here. Arguably one of the best matches of the year. Don't sleep on it. I'm just saying.
She's completely willing to kill herself for your pleasure.
Oh yeah, and this is not to like snark on Bayley either, because she also threw herself several times in the ring, but Sasha got spray painted in the belly, and for this
Yeah.
for this
Yeah.
company and for this belt. And my number one, which has been consistent, oddly enough, it was Io Shirai versus Rhea Ripley versus Charlotte Flair and NXT In Your House. Also, I think my favorite pay-per-view, if only because of the aesthetic alone. Way to bring it back. You know what? If we can have more, like, say what you will about NXT and stuff, I want to see, like, more of this kind of, like, not just takeovers and stuff. Bring back some of the old weird pay-per-views. Like, bring back Valentine's Day Massacre for NXT. Bring back some of the weird bring Taboo Tuesday. Let's go. But other than the aesthetic, which is completely not beside the point, seeing Charlotte, Rhea, and Io just go. Io jumps off the top of a house onto Charlotte and Rhea. Rhea just continuing to be a powerhouse as her attempt at a redemption story slowly like corrupts her a little bit as she kind of loses sight of what she's doing in the place of vengeance. It's mwah. And Charlotte just being Charlotte being able to like they're like Rhea and Io already like really high up there in terms of like Io obviously like arguably one of the best wrestlers going right now, and you have it's just like when you put all that quality in the ring, you're gonna get some quality out of it. You know what I mean? So that was
of course.
So that's my favorite match of the year, though let's not dunk on any of the previous matches. If we're going to say who was arguably the best, I would say the Brody Lee the tribute matches, if only because of how emotional it was and what it meant. But favorite, Io and Rhea and Charlotte. Now, if you notice, I didn't add any of the cinematic matches, and that's because I've set it as a different category because I don't know if it counts the same. Because in the spirit of what I was saying earlier about thinking outside of the box, the cinematic matches were really started off with the Boneyard match, and they all just kind of varied in terms of quality, but it showed just how much like they were willing to keep safety in check while also keeping that creative flair in check. Like Dream versus Cole, which has kind of been forgotten a little bit, being this kind of backyard weird thing where Dream just dressed up as like Negan, and they started throwing a bunch of chairs in the back of a truck.
That was crazy. That match was crazy.
Yeah. There's a lot to say about the Velveteen Dream nowadays, but we won't get into that. But that match itself was crazy. And you also have all these like the what we said earlier about the Elite versus the Inner Circle with the Stampede was wild fun. I saw a man run into one of those football. I saw Hangman Page run from the other side of a football field just to give someone a lariat. Can we? I don't know how the science of that works, but by God, that person is oof.
Underappreciated moment in that match as well was Jericho giving the mascot the Judas effect.
Of course.
Oh yes.
10 out of 10. The mascot sold it great. He has a future in this industry.
the next gobbledygooker. I hate saying that name. It sounds like it's a bad thing to say.
Yeah, it sounds like a slur.
It sounds like it's not, but it sounds like it. Favorite cinematic match is also Bray versus Cena, though. I'm with Ray on this one, if only because of how if you want to talk about just like completely deciding to go off the rails creative and just like out of the box, you had an entire match dedicated to the breakdown of John Cena, the character, the actor, and the person in a single match. And if that's the last match he ever does, it's a heck of a note to go out on. I don't know if it will be, and I don't know if it should be, but it is still, it will be ingrained in my memory as probably like the match that will probably define the creative aspects of what wrestling has been able to do this year. This, not for lack of anything, but just for for everything. If you haven't seen it, I beg you to check it out, even if you don't like wrestling, because of just how crazy it is. John Cena as Hulk Hogan from the NWO will change your life forever.
Necessity being the mother of invention.
Oh, absolutely. I also wrote down here, before I get to my top wrestlers and women's wrestlers, I put the most underrated wrestler because I feel like what he did should be acknowledged because he started out his career during the silent era, which is Dexter Loomis. I'm going to shout him out because he debuted in 2020 after everything got shut down. And his whole shtick is the fact that he doesn't blink and doesn't talk. And he's the only... Which, you can argue what you want about that, but the fact that he was able to pull it off with such a menacing look and tone, and the fact that it was always quiet in the initial days of NXT during COVID, where you hear the other guy screaming, and this just silent killer just coming at you, saying and grunting and not doing anything. It finally felt like, okay, this is a wrestler, like, now that there's no crowd, it kind of enhances my fear of this man. Because there's nothing coming out of him, and now I'm scared. And now that he's kind of developed his own thing to this tortured artist and, like, kind of embracing his character painting while still being this menacing figure, I think I really like this guy, and he's not on my top of the year because he's just started, so now I'm not gonna like pretend that he's up there with some of these guys, but I will also say that he's the guy who I felt like out of 2020, he's the one who made the most out of the silence, and by God, good on you, buddy, good on you. It's a hard thing to do, and not anyone can do it, and not anyone should do it, but you did it, and good. But okay. The best women's wrestlers, I've tried to condense this down to like being one per company, with WWE and NXT being separate companies. I'm sorry, but it's a whole different boat. It was for comparing them, and sometimes. Best women wrestlers. Number 3, I put Io Shirai because when I say she's one of the best wrestlers, and this is one of the few times I'm going to do lists of things. All right, so I want you to embrace it. Embrace this.
Arms wrapped around it.
I'm trying. Io Shirai, if only because she is the best wrestler on the planet, and every match she's put herself into, even if it isn't the best feud on the planet, the matches themselves are phenomenal because she herself is just insane with what she's willing to put herself through and what she's able to help her self or her opponent to do. It's just really good. My number 2 is Thunder Rosa, to keep that theme up of just being able to make the most out of nothing in terms of like similar to Dexter Loomis. Okay, that sounds a bit bad. What am I about to say? Thunder Rosa was able to go into the AEW women's division and make every person she was in a feud with look like $1 million, while also herself just annihilating people. Jared, I think you were kind of commenting a lot sometimes about how Thunder Rosa was just the highlight sometimes of certain parts of AEW. Am I right?
Oh yeah, Thunder Rosa is just such a special and wonderful talent. I'm so glad that she's just around in AEW because God, they do desperately need her.
Oh yeah, and the women's division is starting to pick up. I feel like in AEW a little bit, so this is good. But Thunder Rosa, I feel like, is the person who kind of invited that by bringing the NWA belt and bringing all this other stuff to AEW. So I feel like in that respect, she deserves definitely a spot on here, and her talent is just phenomenal. Watch her matches with anyone. I beg you. But my number 1 women's wrestler, surprising absolutely no one who knows me, is Bayley. Well, I thought about putting Sasha on the list, but again, I tried to limit it to like 1 per thing. But Bayley consistently, from the beginning of the year where she was a heel to the end of the year where she is now, she has been able to elevate the belt. She's able to change her character to being, like I said, this Vicky Guerrero on steroids, while also bringing, I don't know, every match she's in, she's able to just pull something out of a hat, and I don't know how to describe that. And not in terms of like just the creative aspects of the wrestling, but more of things of where she's able to find a new way to make you just hate her, in a way. And that in itself it's similar to MJF. It's like, well, MJF is a little bit obviously a master at it, more so than Bayley, but seeing someone who used to do the hug thing do that is still impressive. You know what I mean? And also arguably had some of the best matches of the year. 100%. But
Agree.
We now have our best male wrestlers of the year. the top three, and I'm going to explain my number one pick because it's a tie, but we'll get there when we get there. On number three, I have Naito. My man finally got both the belts, and he was able to even though I was able to watch a lot of New Japan this year, due to my own time constraints, you could tell it was such a big deal, and you could see how he was bringing everyone behind him, around him, into this huge moment. And even when he was feuding with Evil and Kenta off the bat, after he got the belts, he carried the company. I feel like. I mean, there are different people who carried the company for New Japan, but he was the face of the company for a little bit. And during the COVID time, that anybody who's able to carry a company should be just awarded, because that's a hard thing to do nowadays. So I will give 100% of the props to Naito. Finally getting the 2 belts, finally getting his moment in the sun. 100%. My number 2, and this was strictly for the last few months, I'm going to go with Roman Reigns for all of the male of WWE. Because of the fact of how his character brought people back. And this is my consistency for the male wrestlers and the women wrestlers, is how you're able to bring people back during this time. Naito was not really able to bring people back, but keep them back and consistently keep them back. They'll want to come back to see Naito, and they want him to keep his belts because it's such a big deal to his character that everyone's so invested in. Roman was able to grab everyone's attention by just having Paul Heyman sit next to him when he got a piece of paper. His character that he's created as the tribal chief is something that it feels like the best evolution of his character and the best version of his character, that it brings people back. People have been talk about, I saw people on Twitter who dunk on WWE and wrestling in general, and AEW in general too. It's a whole thing. Genuinely come back and say oh, this dude, I remember that Roman dude sucked then, but now why is he scary now? But I dig it, and then they start watching it, and it's that's the nature of the draw, I guess. But the fact that he was able to do all this in such a short amount of time, and I know that it's out of all the year you're going to dictate it on the last couple months, but what he's able to do in the last couple months was impressive, and the fact that he's able to bring all these great matches and all these great character moments out of that short amount of months speaks to how good he is in the ring, and how good he is, and how he's mastered the character of Roman Reigns. So, my number 1 pick is a tie. Mox was one of them. For every aforementioned reason, I don't know if I need to beat that bush to death. But the other person I have on here, which is tied for Mox, is because from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, this man has gone literally from the backyards to the main event of a wrestling pay-per-view. And the fact that he was able to bring all this attention to the product because of his name, because of who he is, and the fact that everyone got behind him so quickly is a testament. Through the Cody Rhodes feud he had, to his eventual feud at the end of the year with Mox. And for me, that's why I put Eddie Kingston, oddly enough, as my as tied for best wrestler of the year, because of that huge movement that he was able to change about in regards to himself, but also in regards to the eyes on the product.
I love it.
Everything he brings to the mic has always been great, but to see that is him go literally from cutting a promo in a backyard on Cody Rhodes to cutting a promo against Mox right before a pay-per-view, and then eventually you have that final thing that Eddie did at the end of the year where he was making this was behind the scenes speech to the AEW wrestlers about Brody Lee and how we made him proud tonight and all that other stuff. If you haven't seen that, check it out. It's on BTE with the episode tribute. It shows, for me at least, why he is one of Indie's greatest darlings, but also shows how he's able to bring people together and bring everyone here. And for me, that's why he's tied for number 1. And also Mox being able to put all these quality matches and bring more eyes to the product and bring more people, and able to bring that out of Eddie as well, is also why he's tied for number 1. And both of them for me encapsulate the idea of trying to think outside the box and trying to bring the best out of wrestling in a time where it's very hard to do that. And that is my lists. That is my speech. I might have gone on for a year, but it's felt like a year in the last couple months, week.
I really liked the call of Eddie Kingston and emphasizing the journey was really, really good for me, Nick. I'm gonna go into mine, and you will notice that I did not touch tag team wrestling. Some of you are much better at discussing that than I. I also feel like I was so into what was happening in the women's division. For a choice of brevity, I chose to just focus on those two aspects rather than that. So, my top 10 men wrestlers of the year, I will start out with a tie between Seth and KO, who both managed to carry the shows beneath the belts and the titles during this time period. Kevin Owens, especially consider what he's done now since they've put him to the top until this week in a feud with Roman. Even before that, they were sticking him out there, and he was having to, in these talk show formats, get over these programs that aren't necessarily great along with programs that are great, and he was able to do that, and he called out wrestling tropes on a weekly basis, building from a heel to a face through those type of commentaries until he became the regular man who fought Roman. Seth was the primary heel in the company until Roman's anointment, and he was the only thing in the men's division that was really interesting for a little while until they figured some things out. Keith Lee would be number 9. His NXT title reign has been somewhat ignored due to his jump to the main roster. If not for Edge coming back, Keith Lee would have been the only discussion of the Royal Rumble. And yet, Edge did come back. Roman Reigns is in at number 8, and what he did in the last few months was amazing. I will go ahead and say if Roman Reigns, Jay White stays in New Japan, if Roman Reigns, Jay White, and Kenny Omega are not my top 3 next year, I'll be stunned. Cody Rhodes in at number 7 because he is strictly my best friend. Kenny Omega in at number 6. He is the most important thing in pro wrestling at this moment in time. Roman being the most important thing in sports entertainment at this time. Kenny's on
6? Repeat that.
6. Kenny Omega, 6.
Ah, yes. Okay, good.
The Fiend in at number 5. He's been fascinating. The cinematic stuff has been great. He was willing to be burned to death for our pleasure, and I will miss him.
Rest in peace.
Back. Kota Ibushi in at number 4. His matches in the G1 and last weekend, he has had an incredible last few months. Brody Lee in at number 3. I will probably explain more as to why that is, but tell you what, I'll just do it here. Prior to Brody's coming in as the Dark Order's leader, that started out on fire with Evil Uno, and then it kind of hit nothingness, right? And then Brody comes in and it becomes a thing. And then Brody goes into these 2 programs that are the program with Cody and the program with Mox were as good a programs as that show had. And he was the middle of all of that. And then his making the Dark Order matter also led to them being able to recruit Colt Cabana, which made the middle card and the undercard interesting. This thing they've been doing with Hangman Page is interesting. And as you know, my theory on a wrestling show is what's happening beneath the belts tends to be more important. Now, in contrast to what I just said, Naito is in at number 2 for me, and I felt like what he did in his journey and then solidifying those titles, and then what he did in the G1 and as Jared has pointed out, in wrestling with a assured confidence in who he is now that he has, in his mind, had become a wrestling god and uniting those belts. Or well, let me rephrase. Coda would have described him as that, right? But because he had both belts, I mean, that was amazing, and it that made what happened between Coda and him important, which also emphasized what was important about the Jay White Coda battle. Because if Naito is this important, then being above him by yourself with both belts makes you that much more, right? Mm-hmm. But what Naito did was over 11 months, and what Coda and them did was over 2. So that would be why he's placed where he is. And Moxley's in at number 1. Again, my theory on what's below the belt matters most still holds true, but this happens to be a company whose belt wasn't very old when he got it. So he had to make it what it is today, and he managed to do that, and everything he did on television mattered. Now, going in with my top 10 women of the year.
Let's go.
I have 15, so you guys sit down and get a cup of coffee, okay?
All right, boys, here we go.
Well, here's my thing. Becky, Shayna, and Charlotte are way down the list, and when COVID hit and Becky got pregnant, not in that order, they kind of disappear, right? And so then you have this thing you have to fill in. Dakota Kai, Raquel Gonzalez are in below the top 10 as look out for those guys. They're killing it right now. And Raquel Gonzalez may be top 2 or 3 next year. Candice LeRae was fantastic. The biggest bumps in some of these matches that were hers, she managed to make the women's division in NXT important. Taya Valkyrie, number 9. She's amazing. Thunder Rosa, as you guys pointed out. I will say that at number 12 or 13 on my matches of the year this year was the Thunder Rosa Selena Deed match that Jared and Nick and I watched. Jared and Ray and I watched on UA's show, which is crazy. They gave them time and just let them work, you know? It's amazing when you can do that. You can just give 2 people time and let them work, and it becomes beautiful, right? And so Deanna Prazo is number 7, and Jordani Grace is number 6. And the only reason why is it's not flipped, is I really enjoyed Jordani's program with Taya. And so where Prazo has had that one great match with Grace and some pretty good ones around that, I just liked Grace's year better. Rhea Ripley is in at number 5. She was amazing all year. The booking is the only reason why she's not higher. Io is number 4. Her ceiling is so much higher than everybody else's in the world. I mean, her floor is so much higher than everybody else's in the world.
Her floor is some people's ceilings. You know what I mean?
Everybody's ceiling, right? Mm-hmm. She goes out there and she has 2 flubs, and it's still the most entertaining 12 minutes of your week. You know, Asuka in at number 3. When Becky leaves, they just hand her the belt, and that could have been less than great, and Asuka's just too good to not make it great. And then Sasha would be number 2 for me, and Bayley number 1, and I will get into that more, and you correctly discussed all of their advantages earlier anyway. Then I didn't really go with matches of the year so much as just programs to wrap up what I'm saying about this year. Mm-hmm. Number 10 was Rollins managing to fail upward all year, which was kind of crazy. But the point of it was loses to Kevin Owens, which makes Kevin Owens a babyface and makes Kevin Owens the right guy to go to SmackDown and be in a feud with Roman. He loses a feud to Drew, and it's Drew's best match this year. And when he loses to Drew, is now you don't have to worry about him anymore, and he's off and running. He loses to Mysterio, Dominic, and Buddy Murphy. All those Mysterio we thought was ready to retire. He gets in a feud. He's back up right where he should be. Dominic looks like a killer right now because of what Rollins went out there and had bangers with a dude that had never had a match before. And, of course, Buddy Murphy shouldn't have to be elevated because he's better than that, but he did wind up having to be in a situation where he was elevated. And in some ways, Rollins kind of rebooted that kid's whole career. and dating a 10-year-old or 17-year-old.
Yee,
no.
yee.
In real life, 20, I think. I hope. Sorry. Okay. Mega takes over pro wrestling. Is my number 9 program of the year. Amazing what they've done there. We talked about it, but Roman heel turn, run to the top. Either one of those, if they had happened in June, would be the main things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oda's ascent to the top of G1 and Wrestle Kingdom would be 7 for me, and it was, incredible. We talked about that. AJ versus Taker was the number 6 program for me. If you watched documentaries on Taker, you know how hard it is for Taker to retire and how he had to absolutely hit a home run for Taker to be willing to walk away. And AJ was the guy who was able to do that in promos, program, and in the cinematic match. And now Taker's able to walk away, which is, good for him. Fiend Cena, you guys talked about it. Amazing. Inner Circle versus the Elite would be my 4 program. It was amazing. Brody Mox was my number 3 program, and Brody Cody was my number 2 program of the year. Bailey Sasha would be my number 1 program and my match of the year with the Hell in a Cell match.
Mm-hmm.
That is what I had to say about the year. I felt like women's wrestling saved WWE in many ways. I feel like what we have going on currently in AEW with 99 and Deeb and Thunder Rosa and the way we've seen Britt, especially in the ring, start to come along more and more. I feel like once Penelope gets a little bit more time out there, it's going to be better. I feel like AEW is on the right track, and I think Impact is – I believe NXT has the best division in all of wrestling in their women's division. And, that may change when Rhea leaves probably this week. I feel like Impact is right there. I mean, there's not that much difference. And I just can't tell you how neat it is. We talked about this on – Justin and I talked about this on another program. I just can't tell you how neat it is to feel like I'm watching history as we get to a point where we're no longer pointing out that, that's a woman referee. No, that's just a referee. When you're no longer having to worry about whether or not, the main event of the evening, when Becky main evented a pay-per-view, or when they all main evented a Mania,
Mm-hmm.
that was so huge, right? Io Shirai main events NXT just about every time she wrestles, and we don't even think about it anymore because it's just a part of wrestling that this person draws just like everybody else on the roster. That's really, really awesome. And that's kind of cool because I'm sitting here and I'm watching history, and it's neat.
It's one of the
That's all
good
I
watching
got.
histories as opposed to the bad watchings of history.
As opposed to this week just turning on your television. Yeah.
You were saying something, Jared? I apologize.
No, I agree strongly, though.
Mm-hmm. Truly.
Okay, so is that a wrap?
Actually, no, I had one last question.
All right.
Say it.
One final query. Which wrestler do you think had the most drip this year?
Miro.
Miro appearing every week in like Gucci clothes would be a good candidate, I will say.
I'm just kidding. Even though that's all expensive, I think it looks terrible.
Escobar in NXT has quite the wardrobe.
Escobar has really good drip, though. You are right.
I do think he's trying to have drip. Like, I doubt he goes to the store like that. And I would guess that Miro answers the door for pizza looking like that. So maybe he's got more drip?
I will say, for my answer, the Hurt Business. Just all of them.
Ricky Starks.
Ricky Starks was actually going to be my choice.
Ooh.
Oh, okay.
That dude's
Drip.
stage dressing literally 24/7. Like, you see him backstage and he just looks like that.
Why would you not look like that?
I mean, honestly, if I was that handsome, that jacked, I would also be wearing incredibly nice clothing constantly.
I like how you brought back I like how you brought back what was originally an insult by saying, "Oh, he's handsome and jacked."
First of all, Jared, don't undersell yourself.
You say?
Don't undersell yourself, Jared.
I mean, it's been a while since I've been to the gym, given the circumstances. So
Some people are born beautiful.
Oh, natural.
fair enough.
selection.
Maybe I just need more drip.
There you go.
Maybe I need more money so I can get more drip. Maybe.
You're right.
Whenever you go or whenever you start clicking around looking for clothing, look for shiny stuff.
Ask yourself, what would Ricky Starks wear?
Exactly.
WWRSW.
Ray, what was
Damn,
your
rolls
choice for
off the
best
tongue.
So is that a wrap, guys?
drip? Oh, I never
I
hear
believe so.
Ray's selection for best drip. Hold on.
You got selection for best drip?
Not necessarily. Ricky Starks, I guess.
There you go.
Good choice.
Consistency in.
Consistency. Get it in. All right. And now that's a wrap. Now we got it.
Awesome.
All right.
Okay, then for guys, let's sign out. Ray,
Bye.
Jared,
This is New Japan Jared, and I'm saying goodbye.
Nick.
A dab on him.
This is me, KP. This has been a copyright
It's lit,
20
Nick. What do you want from me?
production.
Like, I guess I could expect you to make like a literary reference or something.
When
Like,
you're done,
once more into the fray or something. I don't know.
that's more of the other side of the lit Nick.
Yeah,
You
valid.
know, 'cause he's lit, like the
Dab
kids
on
say.
them.
Nick, would you like to take us
I am
home?
dabbing on them. It's an audio podcast.
What? What?
Go home.
Go home and dab on them.